We have Mai's anti-air options squared away at the moment. Just make sure you're discreet about them because there are other characters in this game that can change where they land during their jump-ins, much like Mai does. Just be on the lookout for characters like Athena or Ken, for example, because they have options in midair. And speaking of options, we're going to focus a little more on Mai's technology. EX Air Quarter Circle Back Punch. Does 3 hits, safe on block, and you can combo after the fact. Now if I were to use this on a cornered opponent at the top of a wall jump, she gets 4 hits. This can be useful for catching opponents off guard or they're playing way too defensively. Mai is generally dangerous towards corner opponents anyway, so that's also another quality that Mai excels in, corner pressure and lockdown. So that's another thing to keep in mind, and now we're going to talk a little more about this move, because I failed to mention this earlier in the video. This move, of course it does 3 hits close to the opponent, but if you combo into this move, have circle forward D, hard kick, you only get 2 hits out of the move. So how is Mai supposed to deal with pressure, offense, or just general rushdown exactly? Well, she can just block normally, or just move out the way, and probably go for a well-timed roll. Now, the player needs to be cautious about the roll mechanic because while it is universal and can be trustworthy at times, it's not foolproof. You're still vulnerable to regular throws, command grabs, and meaties. The reason I say meaties is because there's a short period of vulnerability after the roll. So just keep that in mind while you're trying to get out of pressure. And of course you have her wall jump. She can even do this out of backdash as well. Very good, especially if you want to start your own offense. And if the opponent just gets way too reckless. Speaking of backdashes, she can use backdashes to keep opponents from comboing her. Now, the reason I say backdashes is because every character in the game is in midair during their backdash. If they try to combo you from normals, they'll just get an air reset instead. That'll make it a little bit easier for you to get out of pressure, get out of their offense. And of course you can always find a hole in their offense and just press a button. Like jumping A, for example, or go for crouching C. Because crouching C will cause some jump-ins to whiff. Her hitbox is shrinking a little. And of course her air throw. That's a good anti-air. And you always have the guard cancel roll. Guard cancel roll is a good way of getting out of pressure as well, although it requires one super meter bar. So those are just stuff to keep in mind when you're under too much pressure. And of course you can always resort to this. We're almost finished with the Mai tutorial. Now, if a new player were to come and ask if Mai was beginner friendly, I would say no. Now, you can technically get away with playing as any character you wish to, as a new player. The thing about Mai is that she has too many gimmicks, a lot of which the player might not even be aware of. And if they are aware of the said gimmicks, they're probably going to try to abuse the said gimmicks without having any idea of how KOF works in general. The beginner player is also not going to be aware of her normals, how to use her normals, or her mobility options, anti-airs and such, and corner pressure. Also, Mai is a little bit too unorthodox. While she is fun to play and relatively easy to win with as far as having full awareness of the fundamentals go, Mai is still a rather tricky character to play, especially at higher levels. Imagine a new Street Fighter IV player asking for the most beginner-friendly characters. Recommending Mai to beginners in KOFXIII would be like trying to recommend a character like Gen or Sea Viper to a brand new Street Fighter IV player. Of course, Street Fighter IV and KOF don't translate very well together, but that's kind of I guess that's a pretty good example. Playing Sea Viper or Gen is not going to add up very well for the new player, and it's not going to end very well if they're trying to, learn how to fight on Street Fighter IV. Mai does not teach the fundamentals of KOF. The player would already have to possess extensive knowledge of how the system works in order to play Mai correctly. This is a system's first scenario. When the player understands how the fundamentals work, they can branch out towards other characters like Mai, for example. The player needs to learn how to adjust to how her mobility and normals work in this game. And speaking of which, Mai's gameplay is not overly similar to how she was in the past, how they were in the past. In games like KOF98 or 2002 Unlimited Match, Mai played in such a way that was a bit more typical to the KOF gameplay concept while retaining general originality and purpose in her gameplay. She has a lot of familiar moves like her Ruinbu and her Kachosen, for example, but as a KOF13, Mai is a little bit different from how she was in the past in terms of gameplay. This may have threw a lot of veteran players off because of how her gameplay is currently arranged in this game. But this is how the cookie crumbles. So now we're going to provide a summary of Mai's gameplay. And this is Mai Shiranui as a KOF13. The strength of this character is that she's one of the fastest characters in the game, if not the fastest. Other characters like Dwellon, for example, are not too far behind. This suits Mai very well because KOF13, well, the KOF series in general was a very fast-paced fighting game, and she can take advantage of that. Mai's EX moves and metered options are generally safe and pretty useful for multiple situations and for starting combos. And speaking of combos, her HD combo damage is also high. She doesn't have to spend that many resources for getting 800 damage, just 2 bars. For meterless, she gets over 600 damage, which is pretty good for just both drives and for, you know, seriously putting the hurt on the opponent. Mai also has one of the best Neomaxes in the game. Can be used for punishing her subjects and for finishing combos, especially long-term combos. And she also has very good Okizeme mix-up options, some of which can be rendered safe and annoying, as long as the opponent knows where the frame traps and frame advantages are. That also goes for her pressure game as well, especially in the corner. Now every character has this to a degree, but Mai can excel at this sort of thing if the player is careful. And as for Mai's weaknesses, without meter, Mai doesn't really have a legitimate reversal with invincibility properties, which isn't really a problem, but because a lot of players know how to deal with this sort of thing already, especially veteran players. And again, Mai is also considered rather unorthodox compared to the other characters due to how her jumping arcs and her overall mobility options work, especially in terms of, you know, just general spacing and whatnot. Her damage output without meter is relatively low as well, so the player's gonna have to optimize her options until she generates the meter, kind of like how King and Leona do. And that's it as far as weaknesses are concerned. In terms of team positioning, you can play Mai in any position you wish depending on who else is on her team. Mai can actually play any role on the team as a point, second, third character. She's generally better off as a point or second character, but she can get away with being a third character because again, Mai with meter is better than Mai without meter. She gets a lot of damage this way, and plus she has her Neomax to consider, though the player shouldn't be overly reliant on that sort of thing because the Mai player still needs to be aware of what she's capable of doing. She is a ninja. The player needs to be very proactive, sneaky, aggravating. The player needs to take advantage of the game's proactivity, of the KOF series in general, just to advocate that sort of thing. And again, this is Mai Shiranui as a KOF13. And to conclude this, shoutouts to Desmond Delgado, Mario E, Luffy, Solid Shard, Crimson King, Meanest Rage, all my other battle buddies, including Ocelot Likes Pie, and GG's to everybody else I know. This is the Mai Shiranui tutorial. I am the Great Dark Hero, and I hope this tutorial helped everybody else. Thank you very much, and good night.